Hi there, everybody. I am Stephanie Robinson, and we're doing our business spotlight today with Ross from Renella. So, Ross and I met many years ago when we were first introduced at BNI, and we've stayed in touch. I used to get my hair done by Ross, in fact. When I lived in Falkirk. I've since moved away, and you can tell that the roots are needing done still. But what I'm really interested to talk to Ross about today is his impact in the community, how he has won accolades and awards with the business Renella, and focusing on training young hairdressers. But also, Ross is part of a bit of an institution in Falkirk because it's a family business. So we're going to dive into conversations and questions around running and getting on with the family. So Ross, welcome to the Business Spotlight. The first question I would love to know is, how has Renella pivoted or changed in the kind of post-COVID months and years, and what's the learning from that?
I think it's pivoted loads. Obviously it's been around a long time. So the one thing you do get from being around a long time is experience. Probably sometimes how to be able to change things as well, quickly or easily. Actually, we were probably in the throes of almost doing the salon up just prior to COVID, and then COVID hit. And like everyone else, we obviously were in that situation where we weren't allowed to work. But what it did allow us to do was it allowed us to look at the salon a little bit differently. And we actually, because we opened up the academy the academy was open, but we opened it up as a physical academy. We actually split the unit that we had. So one side went to the academy, the other side Renella kept and used. And at that time, because of COVID, we actually made a lot of decisions to change probably how it was going to function. It gave us a great opportunity to look at different materials as well. Even from things like at that time, we probably wouldn't have thought prior to it about handles being antibacterial, whereas everything that was in the salon and every unit that was there all of a sudden became this antibacterial material. And we just, so everything sort of changed in our whole thought process. We had slimmed the salon down actually a little bit anyway by then. So we had lesser of a team, which I think made us a little bit more sort of future-proof as well to the whole thing. Because hairdressing, not just from the COVID years, but hairdressing in general has changed massively over the last number of years. The sort of larger, massive salons have slightly disappeared with only a few remaining, whereas you have far more independent, 1, 2, maybe 3 sort of salon people in the salon. A lot more home salons appeared obviously through COVID and that as well. So everything kind of sort of changed as a way of working. You've got near sort of 60% self-employment within the industry as well. So it has really changed massively in the landscape for hairdressing. And foreseeable, the sort of downside, I think, probably to the high street shopping side of hairdressing is that you are seeing more and more salons closing on a daily basis now. Already this year we've had, I think, 10 across the UK in this week alone that's closed. Which is quite sad. We had a good couple of thousand closed last year across the UK. So I think it's really sort of probably in quite a sort of serious note of just keeping things as future-proof as you can. Because obviously everyone came out of COVID in a different stance, some good, some bad, some a bit indifferent. And you just have to take that sort of situation and try and grow and develop it as much as you can, really. And that's what we try to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is sad to hear about hairdressers closing down, particularly long established ones. What is it that you do that stands you differently, or how do you market differently to customers and clients in now Renella?
I think one of the difficult things is that everyone jumps onto discounts. Because you automatically think, well, people out there can't afford things. Prices have gone up rapidly. Obviously, inflation rises, all this sort of stuff. And hairdressers are quite bad for being sort of quite empathetic to that, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with thinking, God, people are not going to afford it. I really can't put my prices up. But actually, they forget that also they have exactly the same faces, if you like. They've got utility bills that are tripling in the salons, which use a lot anyway. You've got your own personal side of it as well, where effectively by not putting your prices up, you're accepting that you're going to earn less. Whereas at the moment, there's people going on strike to actually want to get more and paid just the justified sort of amount as well. So we have to be careful that we're not like just looking at discounting all the time and saying, well, we're going to make things cheaper because we want to attract more people. I think really what you need to do is always look back at your added value sort of side of stuff, the service that you give. We actually sort of, one of the things that we used to do as a salon and still do to this day is when you get things that are a little bit tougher in life in terms of financially, a lot of people still want to come and get the nice things done. So hairdressing was fortunate enough to be one of these things that a lot of people would want to still have done. But when they are spending their money, they may just look a little bit harder into what they're getting, for that, and make sure that it's a sort of money well spent, if you like. And actually, they don't mind spending an amount of money, no matter how big or small that is, as long as they feel that they're getting the benefit from it. So we always tended to look at, can we add value to things? Can we launch something new? Can we bring something else into the salon that makes it, it's a simple little thing that we did just recently there was we brought in a whole new teapot and teacup range sort of type thing that actually sit on top of each other, and the individual, I know that sounds daft because you might have got a cup of tea when you came in anyway, that was it, but we changed the way that we delivered it. We changed how it looked. We're looking at some products just now to actually invest in perhaps having their own brand, just a small brand sort of type thing. So we're always looking at things to how to invest and how to maybe make things more special and added value. So if we are doing any sort of deals, if you like, we tend to add value to them as opposed to discount them. And I think, sometimes you have to be careful that if you're discounting, because the margins are so small just nowadays for most of us that discounts really are not that possible, especially in hairdressing. I know your margins are tiny, so it's not always possible to discount, but it is possible to make your sort of look at your services and make them special for people, make people feel good when you come in. Sometimes even just the simple fact to take a little bit more time with what you're doing and a little bit more care. And people, sort of talk about it a bit better as well. So therefore, they spread that marketing message for you. So it's just little things like that we tend to look at.
Fantastic. Some great advice, and particularly love the kind of focus on pricing. And you're right, too many people are trying to differentiate on price, and as a coach, that's something I always err against. You've got to look at the value and the extra that you're giving customers and retaining that margin that you set out and as your goal. Well, yeah, so brilliant. And do you have any offers at the moment that anybody that's watching might be able to activate if they were to come into the salon?
Yeah. I mean, if you go to the website, which is just renella.co.uk, there's our shop. And on the shop, actually, we often have like a variety of different things, such as products that might have an offer on them or whatever. But at the moment, there's a couple of style packages. So they are called the style packages. There's a colour one, and then there's a style one, which is just purely cut and blow dry. And in there, they actually describe what you get by buying that package. But it has a lot of added value things to it. So you're getting specifically like treatments, you're getting a little bit of small product and package away with you. There's future ones, so there's like a half price colour for the style package. So it tells you all about what's in there for you as well. But they too, probably packages they've been on since maybe about November, because they run up to Christmas. We do get a lot of people want to buy them for presents, and then they start to use them in January, February. sort of time as well. So they're still there, still available, and actually are a very good added value. They give you a lot for what you're paying.
I love it. I wish my might be back very quickly. It'd be worth the drive. Brilliant, thank you. And so talk to me about the trading academy, because I know that is your passion, and I'm equally passionate about developing and growing people. So tell me how it started, where it is now, and what it offers the economy and the community of Falkirk and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, it's we started it back in October 2015. We'd always, as a salon, we'd always trained, so we'd always done a lot of training ourselves. We brought every hairdresser that worked with us in Maine was trained from us, you know, so we grew our own staff. So we'd always been involved in training and education. Around about 2013, I had this daft idea that maybe we should go for this contract to run apprenticeships and get funding for them, which we applied for, we got knocked back. We applied again and we got it. And they gave us it actually at the time they split it. There used to be there is a training provider contract, and then they had an employer contract that they've created. And actually, it was when I applied for it that they decided to create it, because they didn't want me to be a training provider, understandably, not because I shouldn't be, but because I didn't have a lot of experience in it. But they knew that I did a lot of training on our own staff, and we had quite a big staff at that time. So they created this employer contract, which allowed me to train my own team and for us to get the funding, as opposed to the training provider who was getting it, which was fine. But actually, it was a huge learning curve for us anyway, because when you enter something like a contract, and especially, should I say, when you're dealing with maybe like a government-based contract, if you like, paperwork's just frighteningly bad in terms of the amount that you have to do. You're probably doing more of that than you are training, which is always a little bit of a shame, but that tends to be what happens. They have to answer a lot of questions, you have to answer a lot of paperwork, you have to have a lot of stuff there. But actually, it was great, because then it allowed us to kind of sort of change and become a training provider. So we actually became a training provider for ourselves in the year of 2016 in April. And we got awarded a training provider contract, which basically means the difference is, rather than training just my own team, we could train other people's. So we then had people from all across Scotland who we could now look at and offer the type of training that we deliver to them. So for a good number of years, right up to about 2019, 2020, we actually were building and basically growing. And effectively, there's different types of training that we would offer. By and large, most salons that we work with train their own team, and we go out and support them. But when 2020 came along and we had COVID, one of the things that happened really was that I was looking at it thinking, well, who's going to train? Because you're not going to have time. You're going to come back into a salon after being closed for 4 or 5 months, and you're going to forget about your trainee. You're just going to get back into doing probably a couple of months worth of hairdressing to catch up on. So I started to say, why don't you send your trainee to us and we'll do it? Because there wasn't actually a physical academy in Falkirk after 2020, because there was another one, which was Athena, but they closed. And nobody, they didn't do a lot of in-salon training. It wasn't huge for them, but they did do it, so they offered it. And that's because not every person trains their own team. Not everyone can, not everyone wants to, not everyone has the time to. So in 2020, we decided that we would open the doors. So let's try it. Let's open the doors and see what happens. So we started to offer training, particularly in the surrounding area of Falkirk, and not too far, because traveling it can be difficult. There are some people want to do it, but it can be difficult. Whereas the sort of surrounding local salons, we try to get as many and offer it to them as possible. But I mean, there's quite a few training providers, obviously, across Scotland. So many of them use other training providers. I mean, I've always tried to say, well, look, we're your local training provider, you should really use us. But it doesn't mean to say they should, and they will. But the one probably thing that is different from us is that we can take your apprentice in and train them in an academy. Other training providers can't. They actually just do what we used to do, which was go to salons and help them to train their staff. So although we do that as well, we have got the one different element where we can actually bring them in and train them as well. And actually, if you really think about it now, for what it would cost you to pay us to train your student, you could probably work on the salon floor and make a lot more money. And now it actually would probably be a very sensible time to do that and have a think about that as well. There is one place in Glasgow, and I think there might still be one in Edinburgh that's the same, but you're not going to get many people travelling from Glasgow to Falkirk or vice versa. So you still need, probably in many towns now or cities, certainly academies, if you want that to happen, because we do get asked a lot if we can send trainees to us, but some of them are coming from like Aberdeen, Dundee, Perth, and you think, how realistic is it to travel all the way down here to get a day's training? It's not really. Maybe Glasgow and Edinburgh, they might, Fife areas they can, but further afield, it's so difficult. But there's so few of them actually do it, and a lot of that's because of cost. You know, setting up an academy, setting up a premise nowadays, it's all very expensive. And to be fair, without going into it, the actual funding element hasn't changed since 2010. So the amount you get hasn't moved since 2010, which means that the value is hugely different now because of inflation alone, wage increases. So many providers actually, there was a big thing about it recently, just, you know, on about it prior to Christmas about this. It's a struggle just now for training providers, you know, to be able to provide the adequate training for the qualifications that they need, which is a shame considering that training providers are the people who are providing qualifications for the future business people, you know, staff. And because I'm not just talking about hairdressing, obviously, you know, you could be accountancy business, you could be anything. But they've cut the numbers. They're probably going to cut the funding, which already is tiny. So it's a difficult time, I would say, for training. It's a difficult time for education, and yet it's probably the time that you should be investing in it heavily.
Yeah, absolutely.
The one time that you've got the opportunity to grow whatever business you've got with people that you can bring in. But if you can't afford to, or training providers can't afford to, because there's actually some just now that have not got any funding coming in at all and are actually paying their wages from their own savings. And that's how bad it's become, unfortunately, within training. But still, you know, we're around and we're here, and we're an academy and we're open for business, and we're trying to grow. We've taken on a couple of new staff to try and help us to do that. Trying to get to as many people within the sort of local area and really just say, look, we're here to help. You may already have a provider, that's fine. But what you may not know is that you can send your team to us rather than doing it yourself. So maybe this is a good time to do that, considering you could probably earn more money just by working in the shop floor rather than taking the time to train your own team. And we'll do it for you. And I think what's different as well is that all of our trainers and assessors are still working within the industry. So we're all still really current and relevant, and we do upgrading skills and standardization and us all the time. So we all work behind a chair as well. So we're all still hairdressers. So we know, you know, the ins and outs of all this stuff. So we are there as a salon, and we're just trying to, as a training academy, we are trying to provide as much support to employers as possible, really.
What proportion of your business then is training versus, you know, regular hairdressing?
Two separate businesses. So one is MTA, which is basically the training academy, and one is Renella. Two completely separate businesses, so they're separate entities. So the salon is actually myself, my business partner Laura, and Moira, and then the academy is just solely mine.
Okay.
So you know, like the academy is purely and utterly just training. That's all it does.
Great. And is there still the appetite and demand for young people to come in and have a career in hairdressing? Is the colleges overrun, or is it completely the opposite? Are people not coming into the profession as much as perhaps they used to?
I think there's always, for as long as I remember, you know, you always had salons saying they find it really hard to get somebody as an apprentice. I don't think that's strictly true. I think there is always somebody there. We've never had trouble getting an apprentice. I think you have more trouble getting a hairdresser, so a qualified hairdresser. That's a different story. But
And that's where the academy comes in, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be. I think the differences though between private providers and colleges are colleges. So some of the colleges will run a modern apprenticeship just like a private provider. Therefore, you need to be in employed status to become a modern apprentice. But colleges also get the option where they can train hairdressing. So they can train somebody to be a hairdresser, and they aren't in an employed status. And that person can get funding in a different accord with a college. You don't get that option with a training provider. You can train and become a hairdresser privately, not be employed, but you have to pay for it. That's the only option you have. Or you become a modern apprentice where you get a job within a hairdressing salon and you can get funding, depending though, because remember, funding only really covers 16 to 24-year-olds, and there is nothing outside of that at all. So my concern, I mean, I've done a talk about, I'm going back about probably 15 years. I mean, to be fair, I'm even thinking it might be longer, but I've done a talk at Karen
Giving
Vale.
your age away there, Ross.
Well, I don't mind. I'm old, so older I'll go with. But I done a talk back in Karen Vale Centre years ago for the local council and authorities and stuff. And one of the concerns I had back then was that we're funding probably primarily 16 to 19-year-olds in Maine. But I felt back then, and it is exactly the same concern I have now, is that we're forgetting that there's people older than that. And there's probably now more so, there's people who are older than even 24 that are looking to get into some sort of education, employment, or modern apprenticeship and can't, because there is nothing for them.
All right.
There's no funding. There's no any other way to get into it. You have to pay.
That's quite unfortunate, actually, isn't it? Because, you know, at that age and stage of your life, goodness me, there's, you know, who knows what you want. I mean, I never thought I would be here today as a, you know, having had a career in HR and employment law to being a business coach. But however, you have stayed in hairdressing, and my question is, you've come up through the family ranks, really, haven't you? You've been indoctrinated into hairdressing, if you excuse the phrase. How you know, were you passionate about hairdressing, or was it very much because the family were you know, owned a salon?
I wasn't passionate about hairdressing. I never actually even thought about it until I came into it.
Okay.
I actually wanted to be an architect. So I did all my studies at school, and I even worked in architects for a couple of weeks. And that's what I was going to be. And then probably two things happened. One, I found out that architecture was a 7-year course and thought, I'm not sure I'm that academic. Turns out I am, because I've done nothing but study for the last God knows how long in hairdressing. And the other one was that my mum actually just said to me one time, do you want to come down to London there's a big exhibition that goes on every October. It's an international exhibition for hairdressing. I said, do you just want to come down with me one year? It was about 6 months or so before I left school, or 6 months before I left school. I wasn't thinking about leaving school, but it ended up being 6 months before I left school. And I went down for the weekend with her to this show and just thought, this is amazing. I love this. What I think I realised though from that was, because of my architecture and what I wanted to be, it wasn't so much I wanted to be an architect. Yes, I did, but I realised from that I enjoyed design, I enjoyed art, I enjoyed structure, and you know, things like that. And actually, hairdressing is very much just that. You know, you're creating shapes, you're creating art, you're creating, you know, various styles and strengths and buildings and dimensions, which basically was what was architecture to me as well. And if you really look in hairdressing, unfortunately, they don't really talk about this and teach us anymore. They used to talk about it all the time, but you know, there's always like that Bauhaus element, you know, German architecture sort of element. Vidal Sassoon, who everyone really still relates to as being, you know, the greatest hairdresser or one of the best hairdressers to establish hairdressing over the last century, is Sassoon was really attached to these kind of architectural type of structures and shapes to give geometry and style into hairdressing, and that really has a strong connection within hairdressing. As I say, you don't really see it or talk about it so much now. It's not trained as much now as it was one time. However, it was the sort of thing that really changed my mind into becoming a hairdresser, was the fact that it still had that design element, and that was what I was looking for.
Wow. Well, I'm quite surprised actually, because I never thought you would be able to link architecture with hairdressing. So that's quite cool. So tell me about working in a family business. There's a load of family businesses in Scotland, and you know, I've got a couple of clients, and it's not always easy. But it's not always, you make it, you and your family, from the outsider looking in, you make it look very easy actually, Ross. And I'm not sure if that is the case. And I'm not asking you to disclose any secrets, but tell me about what makes it work for you and Renella and the Millar family in terms of running a business together.
I think the main thing really is that we all are very easygoing. You know, there's, you know, we have our disagreements, we have our arguments, we have our we don't wants, but we all just accept. And acceptance, I think, of each other, your partners, your life, your whatever, is really important, is being able to accept each other for what you are. I mean, when I first joined, my mum and dad said to me, "Don't call me mum and dad. We want to be known as Anne and Tom. You know, we are business." And it's fine at home saying mum and dad, but and after a while, actually, you forget to call them mum and dad, and you just call them Anne and Tom. And actually, the answer to that, so the actually answer to Anne and Tom, I always remember saying, you know, my brother came in, and my brother was saying, "Tom, Tom, Tom," and he went, and my dad just turned around and said, "It's dad to you," you know, that sort of thing. And it was just funny because Stuart had heard me calling him Tom all the time and just sort of say the same. Whereas, you know, he was like, no, it's dad to you. He gets to call me Tom because he works for us. But they actually don't even respond to me as mum now or dad. You know, when I say mum, they totally blank it. And when I say Anne, she's like, what? You know, it's just become one of these natural things. But, you know, I think obviously having my mum and dad were really good. My dad was very much business related, very much accountant sort of type of thing. My mum was the hair side of stuff. So you had a good balance of both. One being able to kind of sort of talk to from a business point of view, one being able to talk to from a hair structure point of view, and obviously learning the trade sort of thing. But both of them really always wanted to try and push themselves into change the salon and make it different. And you know, our views were always kind of sort of talked around and looked at. So I think, you know, we were always quite easy to get along with. I mean, I feel that I've been very fortunate to have had, you know, like such a close relationship with my parents, in life, personal and in business. You know, I've worked with them, you know, for most of my life. And I see them every day, you know, sort of still in a personal life. So, you know, I feel quite lucky to have had that. But, you know, I've also spoken to a few friends who have got parents who can be quite argumentative or different in their behaviour. And I can imagine it must be quite difficult as a family to be like that if you are a bit different in your personality. But I think for us, we were just very easy. You know, nothing was... You know, we had our moments, but, you know, we talked about them and we all gave our opinion, and then that was it, done, you know, and moved on, get on with the next thing. So I think really it's just about acceptance.
Good for you. And you know, I loved your acknowledgement of the gratitude of how lucky you are. And you know, your parents' attitudes and approach sounds like they really have, you know, made this work. And I'm right in thinking you've got 2 daughters?
Yeah, 20 and 23 this year. So yeah, they're not young kids anymore.
Are they? They're not the young kids I remember for sure. Are they having any sound inklings about moving into the family business?
No, not at all. You know, I mean, like my mum and dad never spoke to me about coming into the business at all. It just happened. My brother didn't. You know, he went on and done something else. I think very much you can either force them or make them, or they get an interest, or you just wait and see what happens. I spoke to mine when I was younger about it, when they were younger about it, but both of them never really had that want to come in. I mean, the older one actually used to kind of joke and say it's my backup. So if everything else fails, all right, great, thanks for that. But no, the older one, she's doing biology. So she's working at the hospital just now in laboratory sort of situations, just her last year of university. And the younger one's actually doing business management.
Oh, so she could be very handy.
Yeah, she could be great, for it. She kind of is looking more at retail side of stuff by the looks of it at this moment in time. But that can change, obviously. I think what I have found though is that you've got one who's doing business, which was, I guess, like my dad in a sense, and you've got one who's doing biology, which actually biology, chemistry have a massive input in hairdressing as well from a science side of stuff. So there obviously is an in-depth kind of growth of liking certain subjects probably within the family because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So just before we wrap up, what would you say, to any business owner, fledgling hairdresser, anybody going into retail, what would be your advice to new business owners or existing business owners?
I think one of the hard things it's so hard to have a business just now, really difficult. It's testing on you quite a lot. There's so many other related costs that come around it. I actually think that new salons, funnily enough, have actually got a better chance of survival at this moment in time than existing salons. Whereas I wouldn't have said that probably prior to COVID. But a lot of existing salons came away with excess debt that they never had prior to COVID. Whereas a new salon starting up now probably can start off fresh with no debt attached. So starting up a business is great. It's nice to sort of be in control of what you have. It will depend on how much growth you want. I think one of the things you should probably try and do is understand your figures as much as you can. Try and sort of do some sort of business or accountancy type of courses, or within that type of relation at least. I went and done a thing called the Fantastic Hairdressing, or Fantastic Hairdresser, which is actually a business course in its right, but it's solely based to hairdressing. I then actually, during lockdown, I became a coach for them as well. I had the time, I guess, and I just thought, I've worked with them since about 2013 myself, and we did that as a salon, and it's all about the way you run the salon, the way you service the people, the clientele, all that sort of side of stuff. So it's business, but purely for hairdressing. So I chose to kind of sort of go down that route as a salon. And then in 2020, they came along and I just said, could I become a coach? Because I quite like the idea of teaching people that, because I can do that in the academy, obviously, as well, which is really handy. So, that helped us to understand sort of figures. It helped us to understand service. But, it doesn't mean to say we're going to get it right all the time. It doesn't mean to say that it's going to be easy. We're no different from anyone else. Month to month, week to week, things can change, and you just have to try and probably be as fluid as you possibly can within hairdressing and business at this moment in time. But never stop learning.
Never stop learning.
Never stop learning. It's one of the biggest things I could say to people is just, I think for hairdressing, if I can only speak about hairdressing, is that I don't think people are learning enough at this moment in time. There is limited style choices. There's limited looks that people have. If I look around the place, everyone's got long hair and balayage, or long hair and highlights. It's a common thing. Nobody's different. Whereas if short hair comes back in, I think a lot of hairdressers are going to struggle. And I can only say that because of the training we do, and I can only say that from just what we see in the salon ourselves. And when they come through, and it's because they're not actually getting enough opportunity to do that. But you create your own opportunity as well, so you can actually practice that. You can actually learn how to do that. But that's why it's always learning. It continually changes. In fashion, no matter how much we like a fashion, it will change, and it will become something different. And that moment in time when it changes, you have to be ready for that. And if you're not, you better be quick.
Yeah, brilliant. So always learning and be ready for change. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ross. Really enjoyed speaking with you. And we'll look forward to seeing another 30 years of Renella and beyond.
Oh,
Thank
God,
you.
do we have to? Yeah, all right.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks very much. Thank you.